This is Grammar Gus, and he thinks about grammar a lot, so he's going to help us out this morning. So let's start off with the deal, because I always have a deal at the beginning of these things. Most of you probably came only because you were allured by the title of the workshop, the most fascinating discussion of grammar in the history of the world. So here's the deal. The deal is if I don't provide the most fascinating discussion of grammar you have ever heard, I will personally guarantee a 100% refund of everything you paid to come to this particular workshop today. That's my guarantee. And in return, if I meet my objective and satisfy you with the most fascinating discussion of grammar in the history of the world, you just need to say nice things about me on your evaluation. That's the exchange, okay? Money back or nice comments. Okay. Is that a deal? We good? All right. Honestly, it's not much of a challenge to provide the most fascinating discussion of grammar in the history of the world, because grammar is a ridiculously boring topic, and I would venture to guess that not a single person here has ever had a single, even mildly fascinating discussion of grammar in your entire lives. So it's a fairly safe bet, I've found. So a couple things. I'll let you finish. If you're still working on the quiz, you can finish that up, especially if you've walked in recently. But even before I go over it anyway, I'd like to talk a little bit about a couple of issues that maybe you haven't considered. First, the question is, who decides what constitutes correctness in grammar? And that's not a rhetorical question. I really would love an answer. If anybody knows, how do we know what grammar is correct? Let me give you an example. Pick a grammar rule, any grammar rule at all that you can think of. Somebody give me one. Don't end a sentence with a preposition. There's a grammar rule. Who decided that ending a sentence with a preposition is incorrect grammar? Yes?
People who were learning Latin because it's only Latin that you can't understand.
Yes. And you are correct about that particular instance, which I am going to address a little bit later. I meant that only as an illustration. Generally speaking, who decides? Yes. Grammar Nazis on Facebook. That is probably the best answer I've heard. Grammar Nazis on Facebook. Yeah. The answer is, well, we'll get to it later. Nobody knows. Nobody knows, do we? You know, and what do you tell your kids? Anybody have smart alecky kids where you correct their grammar and they say, oh yeah, who says? What do you say? Me, yeah. That always works when they're little. They say, everybody knows. Everybody knows that this is correct. That's what we resort to, which honestly isn't very convincing in the scheme of things. So we'll get to the specific answer a little bit later. I'll keep you wondering. But I do want to address this issue right here. And I'm not sure anybody is interested in this, but it is important. There have arisen in the realm of linguistics and grammar, at the academic level primarily, over the past several decades, two distinct philosophical approaches to the study of grammar. And the lines are fairly rigidly drawn. I can't pretend that it's a fair fight or that the outcome of the battle between these two philosophies is still in question. It really isn't. From an academic perspective, one side has already declared victory. The problem is the rest of us haven't figured it out yet. It hasn't sort of trickled down. So you should be aware of this. The two approaches are what are known as prescriptivism and descriptivism. Everybody who considers himself a linguist these days would describe themselves by one of these terms. They're either descriptivist or prescriptivist. Prescriptivism is sort of the default setting for almost every American who's grown up in the school system, right? And the idea behind prescriptivism is that the study of grammar is the study of the rules that govern English. And whenever we correct our child or correct a paper that our child has written, and we say, this is incorrect because subjects and verbs need to agree in number, or this is incorrect because the pronoun and the antecedent need to agree, or this is incorrect because you shouldn't start a sentence with a conjunction, or etc. We are engaging in prescriptivist grammar. In other words, grammar prescribes the rules. There are experts who tell us what is right and what is wrong about grammar. And therefore, the duty of a linguist or a grammarian is to determine what's right and what's wrong. Okay? And that's the way we've always thought about grammar, at least most of us. I know I certainly did as I came up through the education world and into the realm of public school education. Descriptivism, on the other hand, takes a different approach. Descriptivists would say, it's not my job as a linguist to determine what's right and wrong. I don't care. And there's two really ways of thinking about descriptivism. Some say, I don't care about right and wrong. What I care about is, how do people actually communicate in written and spoken English? What are the rules that they sort of intuitively use in their communication? And how can I describe those? So in other words, the job of a linguist isn't to prescribe rules, but to describe the rules that people actually use in real life. There are some who just don't care about rules. There are others who actually are pretty antagonistic about the whole thing. They get pretty feisty. There's actually a grammar blog out there called Prescriptivists Must Die. Yeah, which is a little extreme for me. But the idea is that there's no rules that actually govern grammar, and they honestly have a really, really good argument. I am a reformed prescriptivist. Now, I'm not fully in the descriptivist camp either. I know I said the lines are pretty firmly drawn. I still consider myself sort of straddling the line. I'm a reforming prescriptivist. I'm a pseudo descriptivist. I'm a semi-prescripto descriptivist. I'm somewhere in the middle. Because I do believe that there's a certain amount of rules that are required to keep our language safe and sane and our culture kind of on firm footing, right? We don't want to just abandon all grammar rules. But I also have to admit that the descriptivists have a really good point, and that's this, that in the history of English, there has never been a formal authority. There is no actual answer to the question, who says, when someone states a grammar rule. And I'm going to talk a little about that a little bit more later, because I think that is super awesome. In Spain, or France, or China, all those countries, and actually dozens of others, they have government-appointed boards, academies, who literally are given the authority to decide what's right and what's wrong about French, for example. The Académie de Français, their job is to decide what correct grammar is, correct spelling, correct punctuation, everything related to French is established by this French board. English doesn't have that and has never had that. And I think that's pretty cool, and I'll explain why later. But you need to know that there's a debate going on about this, and we can't just... listen, we all probably tend toward conservatism as Christians, right? And so most of us tend to react pretty strongly. I know I did at the beginning, right, when we hear that there's really no rules for grammar. And my first thought was, what do you mean there's no rules? Of course there's rules. Everybody knows the rules. And I had studied the rules, and I was an English teacher, and I had been enforcing the rules like an English teacher. I was the classic irritating grammar Nazi for many years. And I did it proudly, as though I was preserving our heritage and our American culture. But I had to, in all honesty, finally admit when I found some descriptivists that were actually also Christians and very mild-mannered and very gentle and very intelligent and made good points. I said, you know what, they really do have a good argument. I can't point to, here's the rule, and the reality is you can check dictionaries, and dictionaries don't even agree about rules and definitions and what words should be included and what shouldn't. Okay? So all that is to say that when we go over the answers to my quiz, there's some question as to whether there actually are any correct answers, right? You have reason to be skeptical. So if you don't like the answer, you don't have to accept it, I suppose. But this is my rule. Because it's my quiz, I'm going to decide which answers are correct. Okay, so we can debate them later. Let's go over the quiz, right? This is the one version anyway. Some of you have a different number 6, right? Yeah. Okay, so let's start with number 1. A noun is a person, place, thing, or idea. Who says that is correct? Raise your hand. All right, lots of hands go up. Excellent. Who says it's incorrect? Oh, a much smaller minority. And then all the cowards who refuse to raise their hands. I'm not committing to this one. It seems pretty right? The answer is, it is false. That is a false statement. Who can tell me why it's false that a noun is a person, place, thing, or idea? Excellent. Did you hear what she said? She said it is a name of a person, place, thing, or idea. Now, I know you're saying, well, you're just being picky. That's a minor thing. I beg to differ. It is a significant thing, isn't it? I am not a noun. You are not seated upon nouns. We are not inhabiting a noun. That's ridiculous. And what's really crazy is there literally are millions of people walking around this country who firmly believe that they are nouns. Because they were taught, well, a noun is a person, place, or thing. And I'm a person, so I must be a noun. But that's ridiculous. There's an important difference between a name of a thing and the thing itself, correct? Well, that name, this word that we give that names the person, the place, or the thing, is described as a noun. A noun, my friends, is a type of word. And you can't escape that. It is nothing else. Okay? So it is of utmost importance that you teach your children, not that a noun is a person, place, thing, or idea. That's crazy. A noun is a word that names a person, place, thing, or idea. You see? Get that? Yeah, I had a great story. I probably shouldn't tell it because I'm going to run out of time, but I always do it anyway. 7th grade, Mr. Lang. He's the guy that inspired me to be an English teacher in the first place. First day of class was honors English in 7th grade. It was the first time I was ever in like an honors class, so we were all very nervous at the beginning of the day. And Mr. Lang was one of these guys who came out and acted like he was the meanest person in the world and scared the living daylights out of the rest of us. And then later we realized he's the coolest guy, right? But the first day of class, he said, all right, honors class, somebody tell me simple what the definition of a noun is. And all these hands went up all confident because they're all the nerdy, geeky kids. And he called on one young lady, and she said, it's a person, place, or thing. And he goes, no! And everybody was shocked. What are you talking about? And another kid raised his hand, all smug and confident, and said, it's a person, place, thing, or idea. Because he remembered the idea part. And he said, that is also incorrect. And we were all totally confused and wondering, had we been incorrectly taught for all these years? What's happening? My reality is being shaken. Is this some kind of like Matrix nightmare? I didn't know what was going on. And so he got to the board, and he had a piece of chalk in his hand, and he wrote the word chalk on the board. He said, somebody tell me the difference between this and this. And we all were like, fine. Nobody wanted to risk raising their hands at that point anyway, until somebody, it wasn't me, somebody braver than I, eventually raised his hand and said, that's a thing, and that's the name of the thing. He's like, yes! And that was I'll never forget that lesson. I was like, rocked my world. So there you go. All right. Number 2, it is they. See, this is where everybody gets really anxious about raising their hand because they've already got their minds blown at question number 1. What do you think? Yeah, number 2. Correct or incorrect? It is correct. It's weird sounding, right? But it is actually correct. I had a friend who was a nerd, like I am, and she was at a party that for some reason I wasn't invited to. But she called me up from the party, and she said, Brian, tell me if this is right or wrong. It is they. I was like, grammatically? She said, yeah. I said, well, yeah, it's correct. I said, what are you talking about? She said, she was at this party, and they were waiting for somebody to show up, and she looked out the window, and a card pulled up, and it was them, and she goes, it is they! And everybody was like, it is they! What is that? That's not right! And they all started making fun of her for saying, it is they. So she called me because she was indignant and wanted to insist that she had spoken in a grammatically correct way. And so what I told her was, Mary Hayes, you are grammatically correct, but real people don't talk like that. You sound like a weirdo. So we'll move on from there because I'm going to actually answer why it's correct later, but that is a correct answer. It is they is correct. Okay? Yeah. Most of us, I said most normal people would say something like, they're here, right? I mean, that would have worked just as well. Okay. So you can speak correctly and just avoid weirdness. All right. Number 3, between you and I, grammar is confusing. That is incorrect. Anybody get that? Okay, good. Why is it incorrect? Should be me. Right? Yeah, between you and me. And this is what I call a smart person mistake. My pastors make this mistake all the time, right? Because when we were kids, we always got corrected for saying, Hey, Mom, me and my friends are going to the pool. Or me and my friends are going to play baseball. Or and they always say, my friends and I, right? And you correct that over and over and over. You drill that into your kid's head. And what happens is smart kids realize, okay, I must be always correct. Whenever you've got a compound, you've got something ends, it's got to be I, right? And we just kind of, we accept this. So instead of messing up one way, we start messing up the other way because it's not always correct to say someone and I, right? And the difference is between objective case and subjective or nominative case pronouns. Okay, and I'm not going to go into all the details of stuff. I'm not going to really confuse you on that stuff. You can learn this stuff on your own later. But this pops up a lot. Objective case, subjective case pronouns or nominative case pronouns mess people up all the time. And the issue here is that I, in this case, is the object of the preposition between. Okay? And when it's an object, you don't use the nominative case I, you use the objective case me. Because it's the object. Objective case, object. You get it? That's how it works. Okay? And the thing is we forget that prepositions have objects. Between is a preposition. It's always a between something. Right? And so they have to use the objective case there. So there you go. Between you and I. It's easy. You can remember this. This is an easy rule that always works. It's always between you and me. It's always between me. Never I, in any case. If between comes first, it's always going to be me, whether it's at the beginning of the sentence or at the end of the sentence. All right? All right, number 4 is a big one. I love talking about this one. Number 4, I don't feel good. Correct or incorrect? It is correct, my friends. It is absolutely correct. And this one is the most pernicious of all grammar myths. And it's horrible. It's horrible because here's what's going on. We've got all these sickly children, these poor, unwell little children. They come down to their mommies looking for solace and comfort and love and care from their moms. Mommy, I don't feel good. And do they get that nurturing care? No. They get corrected. I don't feel well. Stop that, my friends. Stop. Love those poor little children. And stop maligning the great, late James Brown, because he was not grammatically incorrect when he said, I feel good. That was absolutely fine. Now, why? Why is it fine? Here, let me explain this. Why do you think it's incorrect? Yes. Yeah, but why, somebody tell me why you think it's incorrect. Right, because you need an adverb there, right? I don't feel good. You need an adverb there, don't you? Because it has to modify the verb feel. Or do feel is technically the verb phrase there, right? Okay, yeah, no. Actually, you don't. You do not need an adverb there. What you need there is an adjective. Do you know why? Because there's a difference between action verbs and linking verbs, right? Action verbs take adverbs. Linking verbs just link. They connect a subject to a word that modifies or describes it. That's what a linking verb does. It links them, okay? The question is, isn't feel an action verb? Well, no, it's not. All those little words, feel and smell and taste, these things can either be used as action verbs or linking verbs depending on their usage, okay? When we use feel as an action verb, we're talking about feeling things. So if you mean by this sentence, I've burned my fingertips, and now I don't feel well, then that would be correct. But if you're referring to your state of being, right, your condition of wellness, okay, then good is absolutely fine. Because good actually doesn't modify do feel like an adverb does. It modifies I, the subject of the sentence, through that linking verb. Are you getting this? I know that some of you are like, blah, 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 I don't know what you're talking about. That's fine. But just trust me, it's okay to say I don't feel good. Now the question is it incorrect to say I don't feel well? It's not. No, that's perfectly fine too, because well is not only an adverb form of good, it's also an adjective all by itself, meaning healthy, right? Meaning not sick. When you say I'm well, you're referring to the condition of you. It's still not modifying the adverb or the verb there. It's still connecting to the subject. So, okay, you got that? So just care for your kids, moms. Poor sick kids. All right, moving along. Tom likes pepperoni pizza more than me. Correct or incorrect? Who said that? Well done. It depends on what the sentence means. But the point is, you have to assume it's saying one thing in order for it to be incorrect, but we don't know what it means. So to say it's incorrect is incorrect. So this is a correct sentence. And here's what I'm talking about. The question is, what are you saying in this sentence? Are you saying that Tom likes pepperoni pizza more than I like pepperoni pizza? Because if that were the case, it would be incorrect, and you should say I, right? Because you'd say Tom likes pepperoni pizza more than I do. But if what you mean is Tom likes pepperoni pizza more than Tom likes me, like given the option between hanging out with me and eating a pizza, he would pick the pizza. Then you would be correct in saying Tom likes pepperoni pizza more than me, because this is what you call an elliptical clause or an elliptical sentence here, where you leave out some key words because it's assumed that you know what they are. It's just kind of confusing in this particular case, right? Are you saying Tom likes pepperoni pizza more than Tom likes me, or Tom likes pepperoni pizza more than I like pepperoni pizza? Okay, and really it's the pronoun that determines it, and the very fact that you put me in there means you're actually saying more than Tom likes me, right? So it is correct. If you don't like that answer, then tough. All right. Because the AC is broken, I am hot. The issue is, can you start a sentence with the word because? Has anybody here ever been taught that you may not start a sentence with the word because? I know some have, some haven't. It's a myth, and here's how that myth began. Well-meaning teachers, homeschooling teachers or regular school teachers or whatever, would assign answers or questions at the end of a chapter, say, right? I remember doing this in school. And so the question would be something like, why did the Titanic sink? And the student would write, because it hit an iceberg. Right. That's a fragment. And so the teachers got tired of these sentence fragments. Technically, it's a subordinate clause is what it is. And you can't have a subordinate clause all by itself. That's a fragment. It's not a complete thought, right? So what the teachers did, they found this little trick to prevent them from creating these fragments. They just said, never start a sentence with because. And then the kids would go, okay, I can't start. Right? The Titanic sank because it hit an iceberg. And they would write the whole thing out, and then they would have a complete thought. So it was a little trick to get them to avoid writing fragments. The problem is it taught them incorrectly. It made up this rule that doesn't actually exist. Because the issue isn't beginning a sentence with because. The issue is you can't have a subordinate clause all by itself. You have to add an independent clause to it to complete the thought. All right? So the Titanic hit an iceberg is the independent clause connected to the subordinate clause. I know it's another wah, wah, wah. A subordinate clause because it sank. Or because, what did I say? Because it hit an iceberg. Right. Because it hit an iceberg. The thing is, you can put it either way. You can put it on either side of the sentence. You can either say the Titanic sank because it hit an iceberg, or you can and say because it hit an iceberg, the Titanic sank. Both are perfectly correct grammatically. All right. So the question isn't should you start a sentence with because or not. It's should you complete a thought. Okay. So it's perfectly fine. Start with because. Just complete it. All right. Number 7. What are you doing that for? Correct or incorrect? Why would it be incorrect? The issue is that the sentence ends with a preposition, right? It's what we call the terminal preposition, ending a sentence with a preposition. Okay, the second most pernicious myth of all time is that you cannot end a sentence with a preposition. It's absolutely fine, and this isn't recent. This isn't a recent change. Oh, these modern folks, they just start ending sentences with a preposition. Where are we going to end up? What's it all coming to? Actually, for decades and decades and decades and decades, back in the 1800s, popular writers were ending sentences with prepositions all over the place. And it was perfectly fine. And literally, I don't remember the guy's name. There was one guy, some 1840-something, who was a Latin scholar in England, decided that English should be more like Latin. And in Latin, you can't have a preposition all dangling out there like that. So he decided that this was going to be it. It was literally one guy who was somewhat influential, and other people followed along, and he taught that, and it just kind of spread, and we just kind of accepted this crazy idea because one guy said it would be good that you shouldn't end a sentence with a preposition. But almost everybody else said, baloney. Why not? It's perfectly fine. Everybody understands what we're saying. So are you really telling me that I can't state a very simple, nice sentence like, what are you doing that for? Do I really have to say, for what are you doing that? Well, you can say that too. Which is actually, oh, that's a great point, because there's almost always ways to avoid these controversies. If you're smart, you can just rewrite the whole sentence so you don't even have to deal with it. And that's actually quite clever. But all I'm saying is there's nothing wrong with saying, what are you doing that for? Are you really going to say, with whom are you going to the prom? Who are you going to the prom with? That's what people say. People have always said that, and it's absolutely fine. There's just no problem with it whatsoever. And I am not alone. Please go home and Google this if you don't believe me. And every single expert who writes about these things will back me up 100% without a single exception. My favorite story about this is, and it's a legend, nobody knows if it's really true, but let's pretend it's true because it's so much better. Winston Churchill apparently wrote in a speech that he hand wrote, he had a sentence that ended in a preposition, and some well-meaning aide corrected it and gave it back to him. And Winston Churchill, being the smart aleck he is, wrote a note back to that guy, pointing to the sentence that he re-corrected back to the way he originally had it, and said, "This is the sort of errant nonsense up with which I will not put." I think he made his point pretty well. Now, I will say this. There is one kind of terminal preposition that you should avoid. Do not end a sentence with a superfluous preposition, okay? An unnecessary preposition, and in particular, here in the South, the preposition at is normally not needed. It's just not needed, okay? Where's my wallet at? Where's your dad at? Right? You don't need it. Where's my wallet? Where's your dad? It's perfectly fine. You don't need the at the end. So that you should probably get rid of, okay? But only if it's superfluous. These kind of sentences are hunky-dory. Number 8, who, may I ask, is calling? That is correct. Well done. Who thought it should be whom? Who and whom really bugs us, right? Yeah, whom is, we're back to the objective case, or a nominative case situation. It's a pronoun. Whom is the objective case. Who is the nominative or subjective case. And it looks in this way. This is one of those sentences that kind of sounds like it should be a whom. It's just not. It's the subject of the sentence. Who is calling? If you took that may I ask out of there, the sentence is just saying who is calling, so who is the subject, and so you use who and not whom. By the way, and we're going to talk about this a little bit too, whom, my guess, will be gone before we're gone. Whom is vanishing from the English language. People are just getting rid of it. It's disappearing. And good riddance as far as I'm concerned. I don't really see why we need it, you know what I'm saying? Nobody's crying because we don't say thee and thou anymore, right? I mean, that's just fine. We found a better way to do it. And I have a funny feeling that whom is going to be gone. I know when I was in middle school many years ago, we learned the difference between may and shall. Can, shall, and may. Remember shall? And I don't even remember what the difference was, but there were certain situations when shall was appropriate and others when you would say will or may. Nobody uses shall anymore. The only time we use shall is when we're quoting the Ten Commandments, or if we're quoting the phrases like shall we dance, and like kind of customary expressions. But yeah. That would be correct, because it's to. It's the object of the preposition to. So anytime you have to.
Would you eventually say,
yeah.
Get rid of whom?
Yeah. I think. Well, I'm just saying it's happening. I'm not even. I don't think we need it, and it's look. We're going to get to this. It's the inevitable, ineluctable change of language. It's changing. It cannot be stopped. Right? There's nothing you can do about it. Language changes. And I want you to get that so y'all can just, okay. That's cool. And not only is happening, it has always happened. Language just evolves. It changes. It grows. It just mutates. And we need to be okay with that. Because even if we're not okay with it, you can't do anything about it. So just chill. That's write that down. If you're not taking any other notes, that's my one point I want you to take from this. When it comes to grammar. Chill. Even that's a new word, right? I mean, 20 years ago, I'd be like, what is he talking about? I find it quite warm in here. All right, number 9. Bob as well as John are coming to dinner. That is incorrect. And it's just a little quirky thing. This isn't really very important. It doesn't come up very often. But if you have and, Bob and John, that creates a compound subject and you need a plural verb. So that would be right. Bob and John are. Or you can say exactly the same thing without and, you can use as well as. That works in a completely different way, and you have a singular subject there. It's not a compound. And so it should be Bob as well as John is coming to dinner. All right, but nobody cares about that one. And then number 10. I think I'll lay down for a nap. Incorrect. Should be lie. And again, you know what? This one's changing too. This one's changing fast. This may be done tomorrow. Okay. Traditionally, lie and lay were differentiated. That lie is the intransitive verb and lay is the transitive verb, which means, again, transitive just means you need an object, right? So you lay something. So you lay a book on the table, you lay your hat on the counter. You have to lay something. That's what transitive means. Intransitive means you don't need an object. So you would just lie. So if you're just going to lie, or you're just going to lie down, you're going to lie on the couch, you would lie rather than lay. That's simple enough. What confuses everybody is the past tense of lie, the intransitive verb, is lay. So you say, yesterday I lay, and that's just, nobody knows what that means. So they get all confused. And as a result, we all teach our dogs bad grammar, right? Does anybody teach their dog to lie down? Do you have grammatically correct anybody have grammatically correct dogs? That's amazing. Everybody tells the dog, lay down. They should be lying down. But the reality is, people have gotten this wrong for so many years and so consistently. And honestly, in popular speech, it is far, far more common for people to use lay when they mean lie than using lie. I mean, people get it wrong more than they get it right. And when that happens, folks, what happens is the authorities accede to that, and they just accept it, and they change the rules because they just can't stop it. And so what I'm saying is, I wouldn't be surprised if some dictionaries are already defining lay as a synonym for lie, as having a transitive or an intransitive definition. So for now, as far as I know, people are still correcting this. I know editors and that kind of thing. So you might want to still learn this. But I think it's just inevitable. That's going to be changing too. All right, how about an extra credit? I forgot to put this on that quiz. How many sentences are required in a paragraph? This is for extra credit. Excellent. I got all these ones. Very good. There's just one. Kids, I'm sorry. You shouldn't know this. I should have warned all you parents. Just close your kids' ears because this is going to blow their minds. Because forever, I was asked this in schools. And they always tell me 3, 5, 7, some arbitrary number that some teacher along the line told them. But what teachers probably, honestly, there might be some lazy teachers who just said paragraphs have to have 3 sentences. What they probably really told them was, don't ever turn in a paragraph to me that doesn't have at least 3 sentences or at least 5 sentences, because there's no rule for paragraphs. And if you just say write a paragraph, you're going to write a sentence. Right? This is my paragraph. And once they figure out that an entire sentence can be one word, right? Go! I would like you to give me a paragraph describing a NASCAR race. Go! That paragraph. I want a 3-paragraph story. I've got it. I already made this up. Okay, I want a 3 paragraphs. I want a story about a romantic encounter. Okay? And so the kid writes, go. No. Okay. So you've got an entire story with 6 letters. 3 entire paragraphs. That's pretty genius. I would have come up with that when I was in high school, if I had known. So when you tell your kids, don't tell them a paragraph has to have whatever number of sentences. Just say, look, for now, I want all your sentences to have at least this many sentences so that, they have some kind of guideline for writing. But there is no ultimate rule. And what I used to always do when people argue with me about this, I would just grab any random novel and I would just flip open any random page, and every single time there's at least one paragraph on there, usually in dialogue, where it's a 1-sentence paragraph. I prove my point every time. Do I have it? Is there another one on there? Is there a different one on there that starts with and? No. A sentence that starts with and? Okay. Can you start a sentence with and? Yes, you can start a sentence with and. And if you don't believe me, all right, let me check this out. I've got authority for this one. The highest authority, in fact. You guys ever read a book called The Bible? Yeah. The author of that, I believe, is God. And if you read the first chapter of the Bible, the very first chapter, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth was without form, this is ESV, without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God hovering over the face of the water. And God said, let there be light. And God saw the light was good. And God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day. That one doesn't start with "and." And there was evening and morning. And God said, I think there's 27 sentences in the first chapter of the Bible that start with "and." And you're going to tell your kids, never start a sentence with "and." Mom, God did it. So, I don't even tell people, I used to tell people, all right, well, technically you can, but you shouldn't do it too often or it gets irritating. But I can't even tell them that anymore. I mean, they have 27 out of like 30 sentences in the first chapter of the Bible start with "and." It works pretty good. I mean, that's pretty good writing if you ask me. So, all right, I stopped doing that. What time we got? We out of time already? All right. Hey, somebody tell me right now, is this not already the most fascinating discussion of grammar? All right, okay. I already won. I already knew it. By the time we get through this, I knew that happens. All right, so how do we started talking about this before. Here's how in America, or in England too, anywhere that we speak English, this is how we actually do determine what is correct. Again, and those are for the people who are at least partially prescriptivists who believe there's such a thing as correct grammar, right? How does it actually work? It works like this. You look at what is actually being spoken over time, what is actually being written over time. And what's really cool today is there's all kinds of databases where you can search everything that's been published in the last 100 years, and you can just check for how often particular words are used. And this is common stuff Google provides called Google Ngram. I use it all the time to see how people are using words and stuff. It's pretty neat. And then what happens is these people look at these factors, right? Dictionaries, style guides like the Chicago Manual of Style, or what's his name, Fowler's Style Guide, that kind of stuff. Grammar texts like you're buying in the room over here, or in schools. Reputable publications, particularly like the New York Times and the Washington Post, and Newsweek and Time Magazine, those kinds of reputable magazines that are well known and been around for a long time. I know, we're not going to argue about that. This isn't political. All right. Academics, teachers and scholars and that kind of thing, and then editors and writers. All these kind of authorities arrive at conclusions independently. They don't come together and form coalitions about these things. They just sort of look at what's being talked about, what's being said, and then they make changes to the books they're publishing or the way they edit their magazines and journals and stuff. And then what happens is we just kind of arrive at this really kind of general consensus about things. It's if you know anything about Austrian economics, it's what they call spontaneous order. It is an amazingly free market way of doing language. It's just the opposite of what they do in China and what they do in France, where some body is given the authority to decide what's right and wrong about the way you communicate. I don't want that. I don't want some central government agency telling me what's right and wrong about my language. In America, we don't have it. We've got this kind of loose consensus, and it's loose. They disagree all the time. Here's what, you guys ever read the articles, when the dictionaries announce the words that they've added? And there's always an uproar. It just cracks me up. And then people get all upset because Merriam-Webster decided to add LOL to the dictionary. Right? What's happening to English language, and texting is ruining English, and blah, 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 blah. Just chill. First, the only reason the dictionaries publish all that stuff is because they love the attention they get when people go wild. Right? But here's the thing. It's all founded on this misunderstanding of what a dictionary is and does. Dictionaries do not tell us what a real word is. They just don't. They don't have that authority. What dictionaries do is like the descriptivist version of things. They just acknowledge that people use this like a real word. And they hang out, they wait around. They never added da bomb. You remember that? Remember? That's da bomb. They waited. Like, all right, that was kind of a craze for a little while. Everybody would say, this is the bomb, but they didn't add it because we're going to wait on this one. And like they suspected, it just kind of faded away. Nobody says it anymore. It's just one of those slang things that comes and goes, right? But cool, which started in the 50s, Everybody still says cool's still cool. Somehow cool has staying power, right? So they have to define cool in the slangish kind of informal way because they're acknowledging that it's being used. LOL is like that. They arrived at this, and look, it's been around for years now. People use it a lot. And here's the deal. Our duty as a dictionary is to give people a useful research tool. And if someone sees LOL, and they're like, what the heck does that mean? We want them to be able to look it up in our dictionary and find out what it means. All they're doing is acknowledging it's just a word that people are using, right? Heart is another one, right? I heart you. That got added. Chill. Yeah. Again, it started in the 80s, I think, with the I Heart New York campaign is where that all began, the heart shape. And it was a symbol for love, but over time, as you started seeing that heart shape pop up more often, people just began, in a slangy way, kind of referring to it as heart instead of love, and that just caught on, and now, bada boom, bada bing, it's a word. You don't have to like it, and you don't have to use it, but it's out there, and dictionaries have to acknowledge it. That's the way that works. So, here's what you have to get. Language changes, get used to it. I've made this point before, right? It just always does, always will. And there's two ways you can go about it. You can get all frustrated and anxious, or you can enjoy it, not just chill. I love it. I've accepted that it changes, and I think now it is absolutely fascinating. I love the idea that new words get added and dropped all the time, and that I love the way young people in particular put words together and create new slangy things. 24/7, right? We all use that now. I remember when that first came out, I thought that is the most clever way of saying all the time. It's just good. So I just dig it, and my life is better. I am happier than all you crabby grammar Nazis. All right, we got to skip through these. Grammar, because I'm running out of time. What is grammar and usage? I used to make a big deal of the differentiation between these, but there's just not that big a difference. Grammar is sort of a catch-all phrase in the way it's used, right? Grammar means what we've always thought of as syntax and grammar, but it also means punctuation and spelling and everything to do with language and rules, right, is how we use grammar today. Usage, technically, is the way we use it. What I used to tell people is, your kids have never made a grammar error in their writing. People used to love that. I used to guarantee by the end of my workshop, I will promise your kids will never make a grammar error ever again. Because they don't. They make usage errors, right? And they'll still make those. But grammar is an analytical study. It's breaking language down into its parts. This isn't kind of the technical definition of it, right? It's how language works and the study of how language works and its different parts and the roles of words and word groups. But I've given up trying to distinguish the two because that's just not the way people use the word grammar. But it is helpful when we talk about grammar study. That's kind of what I'm referring to. How important is grammar? Well, one, as you could probably tell, I just think it's interesting. I think it will benefit our kids if we can make it seem interesting to them, right? That's just good. If they take an interest in words and language, start pointing out interesting word things to them, it's appealing. Jokes are all based on wordplay and tricks. Now, you don't want to, what you do is tell a joke, let them laugh at it, and then later explain to them why. Why did that make you laugh? Because here's what the wordplay was, right? What do you call a fish with no eye? A fish. That's hilarious. But why is that funny? It's because it's a wordplay. Like it's a homonym, not homonym, a homophone, right? I, the letter, and I, an eye. And so when you say a fish with no eye, you think this kind of eye, but we're actually saying this kind of eye. And it's that trick that when they say fish, you're always talking about the other kind of eye. That's what makes it funny. It's wordplay, right? What do you call a deer with no eye? No eye deer. Exactly. What do you call a dead deer with no eye? A still no eye deer. Right. Okay. Enough of that. So is it important, though? I mean, interesting, yes. Can you make it interesting? Yeah. Is it important? I would say, mildly important. Here's what I mean. I would say this. We make too much of grammar. We teach it too many times in a row without kids ever getting it. It's the worst taught subject in the history of education. Right? Hands down. We teach it in 3rd grade, and 4th grade, and 5th grade, and 6th grade, and 7th grade, and 8th grade, and 9th grade, and 10th grade, and 11th grade, and 12th grade. We teach grammar every year over and over and over. And when they graduate, they still do not have a clue about grammar. Nobody knows grammar. We're just terrible at teaching it. Why is that? I have several theories which I can't get into now, but here's what I would suggest. If you want to cover some basic concepts when kids are young, great, what a noun is, what a verb is, that's fine. But please don't try to teach extensive grammar in elementary school years. It's too abstract a concept for 4th and 5th graders to get. There's very few of those concepts that they really start to grasp. I would suggest wait until at least 7th grade. Most kids probably 8th grade. Boys, 9th grade. And then teach grammar in 1 year. If you must, break it up over 2 years. Analytical grammar, I like that program. They didn't pay me to say this. But what I like about them is they will teach it in 1 year intensively, or you can spread it up into 2, break it up into 2 years, or even 3 if you want. But look, you can teach everything that needs to be taught about grammar, English grammar, in 1 year. Easy. It's just not that complicated. It really isn't. Now, the application of all the rules, that's going to take time. But actually understanding grammar, it's just not that big a deal. So teach it really thoroughly once, and then emphasize writing. Get your kids writing, and just show them how the grammar issues work in their writing. Because none of us really care if our kids become linguists, right? We don't want them to be grammarians necessarily. We want them to write and speak and communicate well. And that takes a different kind of emphasis. Just doing grammar isn't going to do it. So focus on spoken communication and written communication, and just make the grammar work in there, okay? You need to teach it. I do suggest teach it once really well, but then move on. Now, I will say this. If you have someone who's very interested in writing, if they want to be a writer, then encourage as much grammar as they're willing to learn. Because grammar is the toolbox of a writer, right? And there are no experts in writing who are not also experts in grammar. Everybody who writes for a living knows the difference between a transitive verb and an intransitive verb. Right? They just have to. But it's like this. I'm a good driver. Haven't had accidents. Very minor ones, couple my whole life. I don't get many speeding tickets, or a couple, but not many. But I know nothing about cars. I'm just a nincompoop when it comes to car engines and stuff. Carburetor, I don't know what a carburetor does. I assume it carburetes. But I can put gas in it. I can check the oil. Don't ask me to change the oil because I'm lost, right? I'm just an idiot that way. But I can correct your grammar. We've all got our own areas of expertise. Okay, don't judge. But I can drive fine. I know how to use the wheel. I can use the gas and the brake pedals, turn signal, windshield wipers. I can do all that stuff, right? All I need is a very moderate, basic understanding of a car to make it work. And that's how grammar is. Most of us just need a sort of basic fundamental understanding of grammar to write and speak well. But if you are a NASCAR driver, I don't really follow NASCAR, but if you are a NASCAR driver, I know this. Those guys race cars at 200 plus miles an hour, inches from other vehicles. It's insane. And there is not a one NASCAR driver who doesn't know every single part of that engine and how it works and how it's running. They can tell by the smell and the sound and the feel how that car is doing, what that engine is doing, right? Those guys know their engine because they drive at a completely different level than the rest of us. It's the same thing with grammar, right? Grammar is the working, it's the engine of language. And so if you're going to be a NASCAR driver kind of writer, then you need to know your engine. Does that make sense? All right, that's an analogy. Grammar necessary? No, it's not. If you want an English credit, you need to have literature, you need to have writing. Grammar is one of those added extras that you can do whenever you like vocabulary and spelling. You can throw those in there too. But the basics of, and this is for transcripting, if colleges are looking at transcripts, they're going to want to see that you did some sort of literature and some sort of writing. They're not going to require that you have grammar every year. Yeah, right. If you create your own literature study, you're just going to want to have probably a list of the stuff your kids have read. And you can just call it literature, ninth grade literature. But then somewhere in the folder or whatever that you keep, you should have a list of all the stuff they read in case they're wondering. Or, because what they're used to is some sort of textbook that just has excerpts of stuff in it, which I never use. So we just keep reading lists. Okay, so don't be a grammar Nazi. Grammar rules are all dubious. Grammar snobs are obnoxious. It's just true, right? It's just true. I was at a convention years ago, and it was really a slow convention, and this old gentleman, very dignified-looking, well-dressed, suit tie, gray hair, comes up to my booth, and he's gazing at my materials, and just to be friendly and eager, someone's finally here to talk to me. I said, How are you, sir? And he said, I'm well. We were in Alabama, had this real southern drawl. I'm well. And he paused. And I responded to him saying, I'm well. I said, good. But while I said good, he also spoke, and we kind of overlapped. And he said, and how are you? And so when I said good, I was responding to him saying he was well. He thought I was responding to his question, how are you? And he was indignant that I responded to good to how are you? And he said, things are good, people are well. And how do you expect me to take seriously your writing program if you can't even speak proper English? And he walked off in a huff. And I was like, I hate you! I did, and I was torn in all these different directions. Like, I gotta be nice to this guy because he's a potential customer and I can't get all mad. But that was one, really, really rude. And two, I'm really, really proud and I know my grammar, darn it. And one, I wasn't saying good to your question. And two, even if I was, that would have been fine. And you're wrong. So instead I was just like, have a good day. And we kept it there. I just remember thinking, boy, I just don't want to be that guy. So there you go. That last point was important too. Like, just don't correct your kids' grammar when they're really trying to say stuff to you. Okay, just a quick tip. This is true about people in general. It's just rude to correct people's grammar unless they ask you. So I stopped doing that. If they've asked me, okay, I'll do it. Otherwise, I just leave it, right? And I sometimes have to bite my tongue. I was at a party the other day, and there was a teenager was giving a speech, and she used the word supposedly. Does anybody else get little like squirmies down your back when you hear it? And my daughter, who is well taught, as soon as she said it, my daughter looked at me and was like, did you hear what she said? Suppose? And I was like, I was so proud of both of us. We didn't say a thing. All right, we're talking about how grammar's not hard. This is everything. Am I out of time?
You have 2 minutes.
This is everything you need to know about grammar in one picture. So when I create the Wasko grammar program, this is going to be the foundation. But this is all of grammar. We make it so complicated. Grammar has 8 parts of speech, right? That's it. In that big circle, there's just 8 things. Noun, pronoun, verb, adjective, adverb, preposition, conjunction, interjection. That's it. Every single word you ever say, ever hear in your entire life fits in one of those 8 categories, right? Sentence parts. Even easier. You got subjects. You got predicates. You got sometimes complements. That's it. 3 things. Subjects, predicates, complements. Sometimes complements. Not even all the time. Really, really simple stuff. Word groups. You got 2 kinds of word groups. Phrases and clauses. That's it. Now there's different kinds of phrases and there's different kinds of clauses. And they function like parts of speech. But once you've got the parts of speech, you've already understand that concept. No big deal, right? And then you've got verbs, which cause all kinds of problems because they have conjugations and stuff and different verb tenses and all that. So you got to learn that too. But literally, that's it. Once you've learned those 4 things broadly, you've got English grammar. Now, the thing is, we also add stuff like punctuation and spelling and all that, and capitalization, those rules in there too, which isn't technically grammar, but you got to throw that stuff in there as well. But in terms of actual grammar, that's it. Not a problem. So how did I do? Did I accomplish the task? Okay. Thank you. I was very confident. It was easy. I want you to speak about something really boring and make it just slightly interesting. All right, real quick pitch. If you like this stuff, as you know, you can probably observe I do. I talk about this kind of thing all the time. I am a big blogger, and my blog is blog.writeathome.com. I publish 3 or 4 articles every week on my blog about writing, language, grammar, fun, interesting stuff, curiosities, useful things that you can print out and use in your teaching. It's really just a way to kind of provide all kinds of stuff and for me to kind of engage in this thing I like. I also do Facebook, and I do even more on that because I share stuff that I find in other places, and Pinterest and YouTube. I have YouTube videos as well if you want to check them out. So they're really easy if you want to write that down. I love the social media stuff. And finally, if you're interested in my program, WriteAtHome, which teaches writing and not grammar in particular, I'd be happy to talk to you about that at my booth 104. Did I make it? Bada bing. Thank you, guys.